1 active third scramble in the descending zone.
Hello and welcome to today's flight. This is a flight I took on August 20th, 2020 from Tacoma Narrows Airport to a small airport about 15 nautical miles to the southeast called Shady Acres. That's 3 Bravo 8. Here on the screen right now I've got our ForeFlight. I'm going to go ahead and program in this flight. So we have Tacoma Narrows already in there, so now we just want to enter 3 Bravo 8. And we'll hit return, and there's our very simple flight plan right there from Tacoma Narrows to Shady Acres. And as you can see here, this goes right through McChord Air Force Base, and it doesn't make sense to fly around that when you can get a clearance to go through it. So what we did on the 20th was we flew at 2,000 feet through the Air Force Base airspace. That's Class Delta airspace. We got our clearance prior to entering, obviously. And the only difference is right here, I'm just going to move this over to the Air Force Base itself because I flew right over the center of the runways. I recorded this on a 4K video, a GoPro video mounted underneath the left wing. It's going to be a fairly short video. I just want to talk a little bit about the flight planning that went into it because it's a pretty short field over there at Shady Acres. It's narrow, it's 20 feet wide and 1,800 feet long. Now, the thing that threw a little bit of a monkey wrench into this is at the last minute before I left for the airport, I asked a neighbor, a friend of mine, if he wanted to go along, and he said, yeah. Now, the things that I didn't do in the flight planning that I should have done was because, with he and I on board plus fuel weight, and it was a pretty hot day, close to 80 degrees, that obviously changes your takeoff roll and your landing roll. So that was something that I should have paid closer attention to. Lesson learned there, and I'm going to show you why. First, let's take a look at Shady Acres. All right, so I'm going to click on this, and let's see what we got going on there. Now, the weather that you're going to see here is not relevant because that's today's weather. Today's the 22nd of August, as you can see in the upper left-hand corner there on ForeFlight. So the weather you're going to see here is not what we experienced on that day. But right now, as you can see right there, that's low IFR. That purple and gray Army field is marginal VFR, and McChord right now is IFR. Okay, so again, those are not relevant. The weather on that day, on the 20th, was VFR conditions, good visibility. There were some clouds, but they were, I want to say they were about 4,000 feet, so not a factor because we flew at 3,000 or 2,000. And some of the other stuff here. So here's the runway. We ended up landing runway 16. The wind was minimal, right crosswind, about 6 knots, and we were correcting for that as we came down. But again, not a margin for error on a 20-foot wide runway. My wingtips actually overhung the runway on either side, and so that's the airport. It's in Spanaway, Washington. Again, as I said, about 15 nautical miles. The elevation of the airport is 445 feet, so pattern altitude 1,445. Now, I'm going to take a look here and show you some of the. So what you can do is, if you have a flight plan, which we have right here, you can send this to the flights feature. That's in the lower right-hand side here at the bottom. I'm putting the cursor on it right now, and you send it over there by clicking up here on this little send, and then you send it to flights right here. I've already done it, so when I go over to flights, you'll see it. So it sends whatever you have here in your flight plan over to flights. So let's take a look at that. So we've got this right here is KTIW 3 Bravo 8, and it's going to ask you, when you want to depart. You can actually file your flight plan here, either VFR or IFR flight plan right from here in ForeFlight, which is a really cool feature. And when you file it, you get an instant email confirming it, and it works fantastic. I did not do a flight plan on this one. But one of the really neat features in this is if you go down here, right here, it's going to ask you, how many people on board and what the weight is. I always kind of overestimate the weight. My weight's about 185. I always add 10 pounds and plus a little margin. So So I've got two persons at 210, so 420 pounds. Cargo's about 30 pounds. I have my flight bag and some tie-down equipment, that sort of thing in the back. So total payload is 450. The fuel at takeoff was 27 gallons. I did check that, and that weighs 162 pounds. So that all of that plus the weight of the airplane gives us a ramp weight of 1,963 pounds right down here. The maximum for this airplane is 2,150. And so this is useful for a lot of reasons. And the most important of which is you can click here and it takes your airplane's profile, the performance profile that you've entered for your airplane. And as you can see down here, the performance profile for the P828 right here is, I use the default one that's in the ForeFlight database, and it pulls all of that information out, and it tells you when you click right here right now on takeoff, it's going to tell you you tell it what runway you're going to take off from, and it gives you the usable length, and it will alert you if it thinks that that runway is too short. Now in this case for takeoff, it's saying you need 1,853 feet, not a factor because this runway is about 5,000 feet long. Now where it does come into play, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to click on the departure from 3 Bravo 8. This becomes more significant. Now we have a little bit less fuel because we flew to 3 Bravo 8, so we burned a little bit of fuel. ForeFlight takes that into account. So you're starting here with 20 gallons instead of 27, so that's a little bit of a help. So not much, but every little bit helps. Now here, if we click on takeoff, take a look at this. So we're taking off from a 1,800 foot runway. When I click on takeoff, it's telling you right here, your takeoff total distance exceeds the takeoff run available by 85 feet. Now that's in a normal configuration with no flaps. So what I did was I configured the airplane for a short field takeoff. So that calls for 25 degrees flaps, feet on the brakes, full power, monitor engine instruments, release brakes. And I also used every single bit of runway I could possibly get my hands on. I actually taxied into the grass to get right at the very, very threshold of the runway. And I just started gently pulling back on the control wheel at about 55, and it flew off the runway at about 65. And but I will say it was too close for comfort, and I wouldn't do that again. I wouldn't take a passenger on board. And the reason I flew to this airport is I participate in the Fly Washington Passport program, and this was the last airport that I needed to complete the Olympic region. For each region you complete, by getting a stamp at the airports that you fly into, you get a patch, and so that was my motivation for going there. But lesson learned. So you can see it right here. That's the weight, the takeoff weight. And that's the distance. That's the total distance of runway that we need. And so we exceeded that slightly, but again, I configured it in a short field configuration, but still a little too close for comfort. There's actually a road right at the end of the runway and a fence. So you have to clear that fence, and then there were some trees beyond that. You'll see it in the video. Okay, the other thing I just want to point out here, again, I'm going to click on the lower right-hand side and go to weight and balance. That's another place where you want to enter in your information. So we have pilot and co-pilot. I put 210 pounds for each, and then a total of 30 pounds of, well, I have 20 in here, but that can be changed easily enough. So it's a total of 30 pounds of cargo. And it shows you your CG, that you're within the envelope, the center of gravity envelope, and you're within the weight limits. And so that's, again, another very useful feature. Okay, so back to maps. All right, so we are going to fly this. Again, we're going to transition through the McChord Air Force Base airspace. That's this class Delta right here, this segmented blue line. And then this inner line here is the VOR, the Tango Charlie Mike's VOR. And we just break out of that airspace. And then what I did at Shady Acres is I entered into a left downwind for runway 16. But in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and cut to the final approach. I configured for short field landing. So I brought it down to about 75 miles per hour, again, full flaps. And then my aiming point was before the runway. And so I wanted to touch down on the numbers. I think that worked out okay. The landing was not as eventful as the takeoff. The takeoff had me a little bit concerned. All right. So that's the plan. We're going to begin the video at the hold short line, runway 17 at Tacoma Narrows. I hope you enjoy the video. Tacoma Tower, Cherokee 7428 Romeo, holding short, runway 17 at Alpha 1, southeast departure.
Cherokee 7428 Romeo, Tacoma Tower, Roger, southeast departure. Approved runway 17, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 17, southeast departure, Cherokee 28 Romeo. Okay, rechecking the DG on the roll, 170 set, feet off the brakes and full power. Engine instruments are in the green. Power is available for takeoff. Airspeed indicators locked, looking for 75. And there it is, and off the ground. DY climb 85.
Cherokee 28 Romeo, contact McChord at 124.8.
Over to 124.8, Cherokee 28 Romeo, thanks, good day. McChord Tower, Cherokee 7428 Romeo, off the ground, Tacoma Narrows, out of 1,300, climbing 2,000, request transition landing, Shady Acres.
Cherokee 7438 Romeo, McChord altimeter 2985, ident.
Ident, Cherokee 28 Romeo.
Cherokee 28 Romeo, ident observed, 6 miles northwest McChord.
28 Romeo, roger. Okay, so we're clear to the McChord class Delta. We're going to cross midfield over the runway and then continue eastbound to Shady Acres. Planning on entering a left downwind for runway 16 based on the wind direction recorded on windy.com. I use that quite frequently. It's proved to be a really awesome tool, especially when you're flying into an airport like Shady Acres where there's no weather station on the airport. The best you normally can do is look at the weather at the nearest airports, in this case McChord Air Force Base or Pierce County Airport. Pretty accurate because they're fairly close, but windy.com gives you really accurate wind direction and speed at the airport in question, in this case Shady Acres. So again, planning on 16, but what we're going to do here is we're going to overfly the airport and double check the wind direction based on what we see on the windsock and make the appropriate entry and landing on the best runway for observed winds on the airport. So here we are, we see C-17s on the ground down there. There's really been a lot of reduced activity at the Air Force Base during the COVID-19. Notice the same thing in SeaTac. Not a whole lot of air traffic coming in and out. Normally right now we would most likely be seeing C-17s landing and departing, but everything is really quiet down there. Periodically there's aircraft obviously coming in and leaving, but overall it's been quiet. So here we are, we're going to be making our left turn here and heading to Shady Acres, and then we're going to wait for our frequency change and switch over to the CTAP at Shady Acres.
Cherokee 28 Romeo, frequency change approved, good day.
Frequency change approved for Cherokee 28 Romeo, thanks, good day. Shady Acres traffic, Cherokee 7428 Romeo is 4 to the north. Inbound, planning full stop landing, runway 16, Shady Acres traffic. Shady Acres traffic, Cherokee 28 Romeo is turning final, runway 16, full stop Shady Acres. Okay, configuring for short field landing. Third notch of flaps set, 40 degrees, airspeed's looking good at 75, sync rate 500 feet per minute, aiming in the grass ahead of the threshold with the goal of landing on the numbers. We're going to bring it just above stall speed before touchdown, and then we're going to keep the control wheel pulled all the way back, remove flaps, and gently brake. We'll see how much runway we use up here on the landing. And on the ground, a little bit right of center line. Looks like we're going to get it stopped well before the end of the runway. Going to taxi here to the end and turn it around and back taxi runway 16. Looking for the mailbox that has the stamp in it for our Fly Washington passport stamp. There's a fence at the end of the runway and roadway with traffic on it there. So we need to make sure when we take off we clear that fence and the traffic and then the trees beyond that. We're going to take it around and back taxi runway 16. Shady Acres traffic, Cherokee 742 at Romeo, back taxi runway 16 to parking, Shady Acres. I'm going to use every bit of runway I can get my hands on. Flaps are going to be second notch. 1, 2. RP's pulled. They're set full rich. Brakes. And we're going to do full throttle. We're going to release once we check the engine instruments. Then we're going to lift off as soon as we're able to get off the ground. Stay in what's called ground effect to 75. Begin to climb out. And then slowly retract the flaps. Right, so here we go, full throttle. Engine instruments are in the green. And feet off the brakes. Slowly retract. Last notch out. Holding 85. A little bit too close for comfort there on the liftoff. I would have preferred to get off the ground a little bit sooner. The second notch of flaps at 25 degrees, while of course generating more lift also creates more drag. And I noticed the airplane was struggling to get much above 65 miles per hour. Of course, the conditions today were, it was 80 degrees Fahrenheit. We had the airplane loaded down pretty good. Again, I should have done the calculations prior to landing at Shady Acres using the ForeFlight tools that I mentioned earlier. I think that I would have done something different here. I probably would not have taken the passenger on board. I think we would have had no issues whatsoever. Of course, we did get off the ground safely, but I need to do some more experimentation with flap settings on the short field configuration and see if I can get the airplane off the ground a little bit sooner, maybe try 10 degrees flaps. Thanks for joining me today, and as always, I hope to see you again next flight.